What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's the one and only Dog Waters, James Williams of the Dog Waters Network, and I'm back with another phenomenal interview. Now, guys, I don't know if you guys know what's coming down the pipeline, or in fact, you already know because we did the Dogman Werewolf weekend by now, and now we're rolling into our weekend where we talk about Bigfoot and Sasquatch and all those type of things. And I got something special for you tonight. I got something special, really, really special for you. Most of the times when we talk about Bigfoot and Sasquatch and the Yeti, we talk to investigators, right? People who say they've been out in the woods, or we talk to people who've had eyewitness encounters. We had some phenomenal eyewitness encounters come on here. But tonight, we are talking to Peter Von Puttkammer. He is a director, a producer, and he's had TV shows on. He's had plenty of shows on TV, been extremely successful. And I'm excited about having a conversation with him and kind of helping him swim and navigate through the dark waters, then diving a little bit deep, trying to drown him in the dark waters, then pulling him back up, reviving him, then taking him back down and trying to drown him again. So we're going to have some fun tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Peter, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I'm happy to have you on, buddy. I really am. Let's start here. Let's when I normally interview people, and this is a little bit different, I talk about their passions and where their passion started. But like I was saying in the pre-interview, I just know it. I got this feeling that everything with you, as far as it pertains to movies and television and cameras, I just feel like it started when you were a kid. Talk to me about your childhood and how you got into just the concept of being a director and a film producer, because it has to start at an early age in order for you to have the kind of success that you've had, right?
Yep, you're very intuitive about that. You are correct. I did start very young. Look, my interest in probably like the fields that I work in, you know, like paranormal, cryptozoology, but also wildlife, adventure, and indigenous peoples, right? So when I was a kid, my dad started a resort and a horse ranch north of Vancouver, Canada. And it was really early on that no one was doing anything like that. And I ended up meeting a lot of, you know, Native Americans or Native Canadians at that time. And this is early days in the 60s, and nobody, you know, there wasn't the interest there is now. It was just, you know, cowboys and Indians on TV. And they really loved working with my dad, and it was like, they call it Aboriginal tourism now, but he really introduced people in the area to the cultures of the native people. And I grew up in that setting. I had like a shaman, a medicine man who would talk to me when I was 5 or 6 years old, and he was telling me about bears and what they like to eat and medicine, it's traditional stuff. And I got really fascinated. And later on in life, I ended up working after I did a film degree at university. Yes, you're right. I did Super 8 films in high school. I took photographs. I started having photo shows when I was like 18. And then in university, I did a degree in film. And I got a summer job working with the government. And what we did is go out to Native Indian communities and make videos with the communities. So that kind of snowballed into, I got really successful at that. I worked with Native filmmakers here in America as well, and we produced shows for PBS and things that were really influential, like, you know, working in the areas of drug and alcohol prevention, things like that, but also getting into their cultures and sacred ceremonies and masks. And it was in the mask ceremonies that I started to see the Sasquatch in the Pacific Northwest, as well as other creatures that are real and some that, you know, are fabled or whatever. And that's, I guess, my first interest in Bigfoot, and that was through my introduction to Native people from an early age.
That's cool, man. That's cool. You'll be amazed that when I ask that question, how many people take their passions back to their childhood. And it's a beautiful thing when a man or a woman can trace the lineage of their passion back to their childhood, because you can see the results of someone starting to perfect the craft at an early age. you see these, I mean, these overreaching, huge, phenomenal results they have in their life compared to someone who just took a casual interest in their 20s. The people who start off young, they are extremely successful. And that's one of the things. That's why I like to ask that question, because they're super
Yeah.
successful. Let's go into, and first of all, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening, I want you to take this from what Peter said and what I'm saying right now, because there's a lot of parents that listen. You got kids. If your kid has a passion and they're young, and you know, kids switch up every now and then. Oh, I want to play football. Oh, I want to be in. I want to be a director. Oh, I want to be an engineer. Just nurture those passions, because when we as parents discourage those passions, then we put out flames that we never know what it'll turn out to be. You know what I'm saying? If Peter's parents would have said, "Oh hell no, you're not going to be a film producer," then he probably would have never got to where he is today. And he's done phenomenal things. All right, let me touch on something you just said, and I want to just dig a little bit deeper. So I'm pulling out my shovel. Not gonna dig too deep.
All right.
So you said you saw the first time you saw the Sasquatches were when you were watching the mass ceremonies. You mean as in you saw the masks themselves with those
Yes.
faces on it, right? Okay, just want to
Yeah. Well,
clarify.
it's more than that, really. The I was in a place called Alert Bay, BC, and there, like here, you guys have probably heard about, some of the stuff that Native Americans went through, and the ceremonies were banned at one point, and they got put into missionary schools, and there was a lot of dysfunction in that. But there's been a revival. Oh, very loud horn. Sorry about that. I'll wait for the horn. I think we're dealing with an angry. There we go. All right. Hopefully that won't repeat itself. Just going back to these natives, so they're the Kwakiutl, or Kwak Wak Waki Wak, as they like to be called today. Uh, and so they have these things called potlatches in the Pacific Northwest. And basically, they're like these ancient mythological creatures. They're also like your family crest. Like if any of you have done research and you got a dragon in your family crest or something like that, it's like that. But they literally dance with those, you know, spiritual creatures that tell people, okay, you're from this family or that family. And this hairy creature is a big part of most of the Pacific Northwest potlatch ceremonies, and it's a full costume with hair and everything. And there's Wild Man of the Woods. Technically, Bokwus technically is the creature. There's also a female version called Zunaqua, and those are the ones that I saw. And they act out certain things that people have reported in Sasquatch sightings, and they're acted out in the potlatch. You actually see it.
And that, if I'm not mistaken, I guess the potlatch, because I've heard about this. It's kind of like, if I'm not mistaken, their legend was that those tribes actually, when they went to war, they had the on their shields, they had drawings of these creatures on their shields. I think that's the same area that that came from, and another
Well,
name
sure.
from.
I mean, they're basically clan. They're clan, uh, symbols, right? So depending on which clan you were, it might be a frog. It might be, Thunderbird's another big one, right? My friend
Right.
Ken Gerhardt, he's written several books about Thunderbird, and people have sightings. So that's another one of those creatures. Are we talking about a bald eagle, a stellar sea eagle? What is it? And in the case of, I guess it opened up for me when I was, not too young. I was in my 20s, and um, like, what exactly are these wild men stories? They're here in the Pacific Northwest, but they have the same ones in Russia and in China and in Romania, and they all have different names, but they're the same creature. And something like the hairy man, it's actually depicted in the royal coats of arms of European families. You see this full hairy man-like creature holding a club, and he's standing next to the unicorn or the dragon or whatever. It's
Right.
another one of those creatures that's part of our what Joseph Campbell or Carl Jung, they reference those things. It's a universal archetype.
No, it makes perfect sense. So we get to this point to where both of those interests collide. your love for filmmaking that you've had from since you were a child to the point to where your interest in cryptids and cryptozoology, they collide and you start working on TV shows like Swamp Monsters and Killing Bigfoot, and your very first one in the '90s. It's slipping my memory, but
Oh,
um,
Sasquatch Odyssey.
Sasquatch Odyssey. How was that experience for you starting
Well,
off? So take me back
well,
to the very beginning, from the conceptualization of the idea. I want to know that, like, you're sitting at home and you decide you're going to do this.
well,
How did you come up with those concepts, like Sasquatch Odyssey?
well, so let me tell you. So this title, and I don't. Now you're asking me, and I don't like to blow my horn too much, but it really is since Leonard Nimoy's In Search of. There really wasn't any new shows on Bigfoot or Sasquatch or anything. We're talking about 1998, and a friend of mine introduced me to a fellow named Rene Hinden, who he owned half the rights to the photographic rights to the Patterson film, which your audience will know. It's the famous, 16 millimeter film footage from 1967 of the Bigfoot, the archetypal shot of Bigfoot. And so Rene had the rights, and he was working with Mrs. Patterson, but he was up in Vancouver, and he was a dude who lived. He was a Swiss guy, kind of cranky, funny as hell, and once I started talking to him, I realized that there were four of these old men of Bigfoot hunting: Rene Hinden, John Green, and Peter Byrne, who was the hunting the Yeti in 1956 with Tom Slick, the Texas oil man, and then there was Grover Krantz, the physical anthropologist, and all of these guys, they were actually replicated in Harry and the Hendersons. They actually based some of those characters on them.
Didn't know
And
that.
so no one had ever done a show about these four guys, the four horsemen of Sasquatchery, as they were sometimes referred to. And I just thought it would make for a really interesting show, as much about these men and their lifelong pursuit of the monster that not everyone believes in.
Nah, that's awesome. I didn't know that. I didn't know Harry and Henderson's was based on that. I loved that as a young kid. I don't know. I think
Well,
I was a teenager when Harry and the Hendersons
well,
came out. I love that.
I'll tell you, the French guy played by David Suchet, who is some of you might know was also Poirot on the PBS series, and then Don Amici, played this old curiosity shop kind of trading shop thing that John Lithgow goes into. That's John Green, and he's actually holding John Green's book in that show. He picks that book up from the library. John Lithgow does. It was called The Apes Among Us. John Green recorded over 3,000 sightings by the 1980s. And then there's Peter Byrne he's the sort of your great white hunter, right? And they're represented in different ways in the movie, and everybody knew about them back in the day, but no one had ever put them all together in a movie because they argued and bickered and fought with each other about what was Bigfoot, what should we do if we get it, should we capture it, should we let it go? And I like the idea that these four guys were together at one point, but then they broke apart over differences on Bigfoot.
So the Bigfoot community itself. So this kind of back and forth bickering that's still in the Bigfoot community in large. It's been there since the inception, basically. That's good to know. I didn't know that. I always was like, man, why is everybody always arguing so much? But it's been that way since the beginning. That's another piece of information.
Yeah,
That's a gold. That's a
yeah,
gem you just dropped, like a golden
yeah.
nugget for real.
And a
Wow.
lot of your listeners will know Lauren Coleman. He's kind
Yeah.
of officially the cryptozoologist.
Right.
And Lauren actually taught a college course based on Sasquatch Odyssey. He taught a whole course based on, because it's the history of the hunt for Bigfoot, and so he helped really promote it, and he talked a lot about he called it the best show ever done on Bigfoot, and it's certainly the only one that was about the history of the hunt for Bigfoot and putting those four guys together. No one did that. So it was fun. It actually got shortlisted for the Academy Awards. It was the IDA. It's in LA, International Documentary Association. They picked it out of 500 films. They picked 11, and when they picked those 11, they put it in a theater for 2 weeks, which qualifies you for that means you're allowed to enter it into the Oscars. And that was quite an honor. We didn't win because usually it's really serious social issue films that get picked, but it was still an honor to be in it, and it was on that kind of level, right? And it's done really well. It still sells really well, and people like it.
Well, the way I see it, Sasquatch and Bigfoot content is timeless because as the popularity and fame of this cryptid evolves, historically people go back and look to try and find things, so that's never going anywhere in my mind, because people always want to trace things back to the source. So you putting that together back then, it's not going anywhere. There's always going to be interest in it because the topic of cryptids is only getting more and more popular. It's kind of crazy where it is right now, but it's in this crazy space where it's getting more, the new cell phones, and you get more footage. It's insane, man. It really is.
Well, I'm glad we're talking, because at some point the broadcasters decided that people only wanted to hear about ghosts and and night vision shows about hunting ghosts, and so they didn't support. The last few years they haven't been supporting cryptid shows so much. And there's one that's out there right now. Some friends of mine are on it, Sage Accord and Maria. I know both of them, and I'm glad they've got that on the air. But I think there's room for more shows, so so we can talk. You can ask me the questions. I've done a lot of this. I've done probably 200 films in my life and won about 80 awards and produced for all the world's broadcasters: BBC, National Geographic, Discovery, Animal Planet, History, TLC. I've worked for all of them.
Well, I'll tell you, just as a point of reference, so there's a guy named Tony Merkel, and this is how much the interest is available out there in cryptids. Tony, good friend of mine, did his own documentary that he shot about Dogman, and he went to I want to say he went to LBL. Forgot where Tony went, but Tony ended up getting like 100,000 views on pretty much a homemade documentary. So
that's incredible.
And you take this interview and you send this to people so they'll understand, to the TV producers, and they need to understand. I'm serious. They need to understand the interest in cryptids is so far beyond what they will ever understand if they don't have their fingers in the dirt and kind of digging around in the soil. Because, for example, you produce TV shows. So let's say the average Bigfoot show, how many viewers would they have in a night on one episode? Is it millions? Is it 100,000s? What is it?
Oh gosh, it depends. It depends on the network, really. I'm not sure what the numbers are now.
Ballpark. You don't have to be right. Just a ballpark.
Well, I certainly know in its heyday, Finding Bigfoot was probably getting 1 to 2 million viewers. Something like that.
And so here's where they're missing, and this is what they're missing. So across the cryptid space, there's podcasters who get 1 million downloads per day. There's YouTubers who get millions of views per 9 million, 12 million views per month. And so if they ignore the space has evolved to the point to where if they know how to tap into the right people, it will blow anything out of the water. But if they don't tap into the right sources, it won't blow anything out of the water. Okay, that's enough. I'm off my soapbox. Let's go into some of the other stuff. Walk me through when you got to Swamp Monsters. Which one came first? Was it
Swamp Monsters was actually an episode of Biggest and Baddest.
Okay.
It wasn't not to be confused with Swamp People, because I don't like to shoot gators. I live and let live kind of guy on the gators.
I shot him, bro.
I've done some. Hey man, I did a gator rescue. We did a gator rescue show, and my host went into 100-foot long black tunnel that there's absolutely no light, and there was a 7-foot gator in there, and he had to push a trash can through, and there was a guy on the other side that put a rope around its tail and dragged it out. It's really crazy. Especially because I could just hear, I was worried about my guy, biologist, and he's in there, and all I hear, it's like a radio play. You can't see him, but you hear, like, oh my God, it's coming through the bottom. I'm like, oh shit, get out of there.
Playing with dinosaurs is what it should have been called, because that's what he's doing.
Yeah,
playing with freaking dinosaurs.
But anyway, I'll just tell you. So basically, I created a series called Biggest and Baddest. 2 seasons have been on National Geographic here. It's with a British guy named Niall McCann. He's really tough. He's, like I said, he's rowed across the Atlantic Ocean in a rowboat in 60 days with a friend. He's crossed Greenland's polar ice cap twice. One time on a speed wing, that's like a hang glider type thing, paraglider. Yeah, skis and speed wings. So he's a pretty hardcore guy. He's actually working on anti-poaching teams in Africa right now, heading up those. So we work with Niall, and we caught some of the biggest anacondas ever on camera. For real, nothing set up. We went after stories, like they're really conservation stories, but it's like, why are these predators? People are so afraid of them, and like, what are the predators up to, right? Sometimes the animals we fear the most need the most help. So it was kind of that. It had a conservation message, but we were in your face, like we would go right to where these animals are. And the most recent, we did season 3. I was shooting in 2019 in the Arctic and in India and in Texas. And in the Arctic, we worked with polar bears, and we got really close to getting attacked there. We had a really good guy who was watching our back, but you never know when they're going to come at you. And that story was about how the ocean basically, like the freeze up is way later now because of the climate change and stuff. So they're 3-4 months later, the polar bears are just hanging around the towns, and they're attacking people. And we interviewed a young woman at Halloween who was chased by a polar bear in the town, and it picked her up, it scalped her, and then threw her around like a rag doll, like the way they kill seals, trying to break its neck.
Holy crap.
And she survived, and she's okay. And so we're up there right with the polar bears, and we're saying, okay, how is this changing planet? How is it affecting human-animal conflict? So yeah, even the wildlife shows I do are in your face and adventurous with a good message.
So you've been out as a director. That means you're out on set. You're behind camera when all the stuff is going on. On that series, what was the scariest moment for you being out there on those adventure series? Something that was like, holy crap, we might need to get out of here. Well,
we've had a lot of close encounters. We got charged by tigers in Nepal. We were with a group of forest wardens, and the way they get around is on elephants, and because there's no cars and no roads, and that's the way you get in. And tiger came out of nowhere. I got a really good shot of it. I was actually riding behind Niall, and I was shooting that, and I got it. It basically appeared in the grass, looked at us, and then covered 100 yards in about 5 seconds, and came right to the foot of the elephant and turned. But there was a kill site close by, and maybe a yearling cub, so she was telling us to get the hell out. And but we've had on the last show in 2019, we were in the woods, and I worked with forest elephants before, and they're the most dangerous. And we're telling the story how they're running out of land, they're running out of jungle, and so they're wandering through farms and communities in India, and people try to stop them. And a lot of times it's government sanctioned. They have these flaming torches. So elephants don't like flaming torches. And so they came, one of them charged, and my camera assistant, Andy, actually was, for some reason, trying to save our tripod and was running with the tripod and fell. And the elephant came within 20 feet of him and he thought he was going to get stomped on, and it just stopped and trumpeted and turned and left. But yeah, close encounters like that.
Dude, that's way too much for me. That's way too much for me. I'm not like I'm Louisiana boy, so we kill gators because it was in a neighborhood where we grew up at, and if you kill a gator, you're gonna eat it. But I'm not. Y'all, you guys are way more adventurous than I would ever be. Tigers and and elephants, that's way
We
too much for me.
we had a microchip inside a 18-foot king cobra, and we were following it through the forest, and they would be tracking it, but then all of a sudden they'd lose track of where it was, and suddenly like this thing appears like a foot and a half away from my host's feet, and so this is the most venomous. There's other snakes that have more potent venom, but this has the most venom. It's the longest venomous snake in the world. It can kill 20 men or one elephant. And so the guides were all like a statue, like a statue, and we're all like frozen, and this thing goes by like it seems to take forever. So we had some close calls with them, and they actually like to go to the roads, and they rise up 6 feet in the air, and they look each way before they cross. They look each way, and if they see a car or any movement, they drop and they go along the ditch, and they wait again, and they wait. They only cross when the moment's right. So
That wow. 6 feet in the air? Whoa, bro. That's man, no.
there's a nine. They can be 19 to 20 feet a king cobra. So
Dude,
that's giant python size, but they're packing enough venom to kill an elephant.
that's scary. That's horrific to be out in the woods walking around, or this is the jungle, to be walking around and something rises up 6 feet tall, ready to strike you. Man, that's the stuff of nightmares. All right, let's move on to some of the Bigfoot stuff that you've done.
Yep.
How did you get into those Bigfoot shows? What was the impetus for you starting those Bigfoot shows, the more recent ones?
Sure. So I told you about my early days with Native people, and then I did Sasquatch Odyssey. And then in 2000, we did a show called Monster Hunters, which was really the first crypto show on American TV that was made here. And it was also the first show on Discovery with Monster Anything. That was before Monster Garage. And in fact, there weren't any reality shows yet. So I was arguing that we needed to let people speak and not just put narration over everything. So it was fairly unique when we did it, and it was on TLC, and we covered 6 creatures worldwide, including chupacabra in the days when chupacabra was a flying winged alien-like creature in Puerto Rico and didn't resemble a dog in Mexico. Chupacabra started in Puerto Rico. And then we also did the Cadbosaurus, which is a sea serpent in the Pacific Northwest. We did the Australian Yowie, which is a Bigfoot in Australia. And I wanted to do things that were slightly different, that hadn't been done too often. And that, just, snowballed. Like, we did more shows like that. And the most recent Bigfoot show I did was called Killing Bigfoot. Not actually my first choice for the title, but all the networks seemed to like it. But so, look, there's 2 groups in the U.S. that have been researching Bigfoot longer than any others. One is BFRO, which is in Finding Bigfoot, and the other is the GCBRO, which is in the South. And they've got the same level of experience, and no one had ever done a show with them. And being in the South, the creature is supposed to be very different. It's leaner, it's quicker, and it's aggressive. So GCBRO has got literally like hundreds, maybe thousands of sighting reports that come into their website, and there are people that were genuinely terrified. So we went out with the GCBRO. These guys are armed, and but they're very they're serious about this. They're not out to shoot. anything that moves in the woods. These guys have got backgrounds in the military, ex-cops, ex-mountain rescue, never had an injury on set or anything like that. And all the 20 plus years they've been doing it. And really what they want to do is they want to scare the creature off. The only killing part is they said, look, if we ever got like 100% positive critter in our sights, that we would take a specimen, because science needs a specimen. And they're right about that. If you look at the history of any animal, and you look at all the European museums and even the Smithsonian and the Natural History Museum in New York, they're all filled with specimens. And that's because that's what science did. So that's what they're saying. And of course, it created controversy. I thought it was good for ratings, generally. No Bigfoot were harmed in the making of the show. And everyone was very careful. And it really was a look at what they do and the people that they respond to. And there's genuine concern about these animals, taking pets, farm animals, frightening people in their homes. And that's what it was about. And I was interested in it.
Yes, I hope you have enjoyed part of this interview. But if you want to hear the rest of this, you need to be a member at IamDogWaters.com. Yes, don't be cheap. It is well worth the money to hear the top level content that we create. IamDogWaters.com. Become a member today.